Before there was anything at all, before the stars, before the wind, before the notion of time itself, there existed only chaos. Chaos was not a storm, nor an explosion, nor a place. It was emptiness in its purest form, a vast, silent, unknowable expanse that contained everything and nothing at once. It had no shape, no boundary, no heartbeat. And yet within that stillness, something waited. For uncounted ages, chaos existed alone. It was the endless sea of potential, a sleeping dream before the dawn of existence. There was no light, no darkness, no sound. Only a calm, infinite void, suspended between being and not being. And then, from that sacred silence, something began to stir, a trembling in the fabric of nothingness, a whisper of creation that would change everything forever. From chaos came Gaia, the earth, the first mother and the oldest of all beings. She rose out of the void, vast and steady, the foundation upon which all that would ever exist would stand. Beneath her surface, mountains would one day rise. Across her body, oceans would flow. She was the beginning of form, patient, nurturing, and eternal. After Gaia came Tartarus, the deep abyss, the dark pit beneath all existence. It was the shadow of creation itself, a place of depth and confinement, a reminder that even the light must cast a darkness. Together, Gaia and Tartarus marked the first balance in the cosmos, the above and the below, the seen and the hidden, the fertile and the void. Then from chaos came Eros, not the playful god of desire known in later myths, but the ancient force of attraction, the primal longing that draws one thing to another. Eros was the spark of union, the silent will that urged existence to grow, to change, to love. Without Eros, nothing could connect, and the universe would have remained a cold, lifeless expanse. With Eros came motion, and motion, once begun, could never be undone. Out of this movement came new shapes of being. From the shadow of chaos arose Nyx, the night, mysterious and veiled, her presence soft and absolute. Alongside her came Erebus, the darkness, deep and endless. Together they filled the void with the first rhythm, the coming and going of shadow, the gentle pulse of contrast. It was the first heartbeat of creation. The world was still simple, silent, and pure. But Gaia, the Great Mother, was restless. She felt the weight of the empty sky above her, unbroken and cold. In her longing for completion, she gave birth to Uranus, the sky, vast, radiant, and filled with glittering stars. He stretched himself across her body, covering her from end to end. When Gaia looked upon Uranus, she found beauty and comfort. And when Uranus looked upon Gaia, he saw form, stability, and the promise of creation. Together, earth and sky became the first divine pair, the eternal embrace that gave structure to all things. From their union, the world as the Greeks imagined it truly began to take shape. Rivers carved the land, winds began to stir, and the heavens turned above. But most importantly, from their love came life, not mortal life as we know it, but the divine beings who would shape the destiny of the cosmos, the Titans. Each child of Gaia and Uranus was vast, powerful, and eternal. They embodied the forces of the world, the ocean, the light, the memory, the moon, the law. They were the first forms of order within a universe that had been born from chaos. The harmony of Gaia and Uranus brought peace, and for a time the cosmos rested in balance. Yet even in the beauty of this new creation, shadows began to stir once again. Beneath the earth, deep in the unseen chambers of Tartarus, forces still slept, wild, unshaped, and waiting. The story of the Titans was about to begin, and with it the first struggle between freedom and power, the struggle that would echo through every age of gods and men to come.
After Gaia and Uranus joined in their vast and endless embrace, the world was no longer silent. Across the stillness of creation, the first echoes of life and purpose began to stir. From the union of earth and sky came the first generation of divine beings known to the ancient Greeks as the Titans. These were not gods in the way we imagine them now. No golden thrones or temples stood for their worship. They were primal forces, immense and eternal, the building blocks of the cosmos itself, each embodying a piece of existence. There were 12 in all. The first was Oceanus, the endless river that circled the world, his currents forming the boundaries of the known and unknown. Then came Coeus, keeper of intelligence and the axis of heaven. Creus followed, the pillar of constellations and celestial order. Hyperion was born next, the Titan of light, father of the sun, the moon, and the dawn. Iapetus came after him, a being of craft, mortality, and the human struggle that would one day echo in his children. And last among the brothers was Cronus, the youngest and cunning, whose spirit was both gentle and dangerous, a mixture of patience and hidden ambition. Their sisters were no less mighty. Theia, radiant and pure, was the mother of all brilliance and vision. Rhea, gentle and wise, embodied nurturing and growth. Themis personified divine law and balance, the sense of justice that kept the universe from falling back into chaos. Mnemosyne was the Titaness of memory, the keeper of what was and what will be remembered. Phoebe shone like the moon, her light cold and thoughtful, the reflection of wisdom. And Tethys, vast and calm, was the spirit of the sea's nourishing waters. Together, these 12 shaped the world in harmony. They were not yet gods of worship or prayer. They were the rhythm of creation itself, the flow of water, the turn of the sun, the rising of the moon, the breath of wind upon stone. Under their watch, the newborn universe grew calm, filled with structure and balance. But yet, deep beneath the peace of their reign, the shadow of Uranus's fear began to darken. For Gaia, who was endlessly fertile, continued to bring forth children, beings even more powerful than the Titans. Among them were the Cyclopes, each with a single blazing eye in the center of their forehead, masters of thunder and lightning. Then came the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, whose vast bodies bore 100 arms and 50 heads, creatures of unfathomable strength. When Uranus looked upon these children, he felt no love, only terror. Their shapes were wild, their power too great, their nature uncontrollable. To him, they were chaos reborn, reminders of the void he had once ruled alone. And so, in fear and disgust, Uranus took the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires and hurled them deep into the abyss of Tartarus, the dark prison at the very roots of Gaia herself. The earth groaned in agony. The weight of her imprisoned children filled her with sorrow, and her heart hardened against her once beloved sky. The harmony of creation had been broken. Where once there was unity, there was now cruelty and mistrust. Gaia, wounded and furious, began to plot revenge. In secret, she forged a great sickle from the hardest flint and called upon her Titan sons to help her overthrow Uranus. Yet one by one they turned away in fear. None dared to raise a hand against their father, none except Cronus, the youngest. Cronus, clever and ambitious, listened to his mother's whispers. He looked upon the vast heavens and saw not just tyranny, but opportunity. He agreed to take up the sickle and end the reign of Uranus, to free his brothers and restore balance to the world. Gaia's voice trembled with both pride and dread, for she knew that the act of defiance she inspired would change the course of all creation. When the night of rebellion came, Uranus descended to lay with Gaia as he always had. But as the sky bent down to meet the earth, Cronus rose from the shadows. With his mother's sickle in hand, he struck, severing the sky from the earth forever. Uranus cried out in pain, and his blood fell on Gaia, sinking into her soil. From that blood, strange and powerful beings emerged, the Furies, spirits of vengeance, who would forever punish those who spilled the blood of kin, the mighty giants, born of wrath. And from the foam that gathered in the sea, a being of perfect beauty arose, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. With Uranus defeated, the rule of the Titans began. Cronus freed his imprisoned siblings, and for the first time the heavens, the earth, and the abyss existed in balance once again. The reign of Cronus was known to later poets as the Golden Age. It was a time before toil, before sorrow, before greed. The earth gave freely of her gifts, and men, newly formed from her clay, lived in harmony. No one knew hunger or suffering, and death came gently, like sleep. The seasons were kind, the rivers pure, and the stars glowed softly in their eternal places. But even in this age of peace, shadows lingered at the edge of perfection. Cronus, like his father before him, was haunted by a prophecy. It was said that one day a child of his own blood would rise up and overthrow him, ending his rule as he had ended Uranus. At first, Cronus dismissed the prophecy as the fearful gossip of fate. But as time passed and Rhea, his beloved sister and queen, began to bear him children, his heart grew heavy with dread. When Rhea's first child was born, a daughter named Hestia, Cronus looked upon her tiny face and felt both love and fear. And so, rather than risk the prophecy's truth, he swallowed her whole. When Demeter was born, he did the same. Then came Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each child swallowed the moment they drew breath, imprisoned within their father's body, where even time could not touch them. Rhea was stricken with grief. The thought of bearing child after child, only to see them consumed, filled her heart with despair. She loved Cronus once, but the love that had warmed her soul turned to quiet hatred. And when she learned she was to bear another, she resolved that this one would be saved. When her sixth child was born, Rhea went to Gaia, her mother, and begged for help. The earth listened and took pity. Together they devised a plan. On the night the child came into the world, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloths and handed it to Cronus. The Titan, blind with fear and pride, swallowed it without question, believing he had once again secured his reign. But the real child, a son, had been hidden away in a sacred cave on the island of Crete. There the infant Zeus was nurtured by divine nymphs and fed on the milk of Amalthea, the goat of heaven. Around the cave, the Curetes, warrior spirits loyal to Rhea, clashed their shields and spears to drown out the cries of the baby, lest Cronus hear.
In secret, the child grew strong. His eyes shone with a calm intelligence, his heart filled with both courage and compassion. The earth whispered to him, and the sky watched in silence, knowing that one day this hidden child would change the order of the universe once again. Cronus, unaware, ruled on. The golden age began to wane. The fruits of the earth no longer ripened as they once had. The rivers ran slower, and the air felt heavy. Deep within the Titan's heart, he sensed that something had shifted, that his father's curse had not been escaped, only delayed. Far away on the mountains of Crete, Zeus stood at the edge of his destiny. The wind that stirred his hair was the same breath that once moved through chaos itself. He was the last child of Cronus, but also the first of a new generation. And though he did not yet know it, the time of the Titans was coming to an end.
For a long time, the rule of Cronus seemed unshakable. His reign was known as the Golden Age, a time of peace and abundance when the earth gave its fruits freely and mortals, still simple and innocent, lived without pain or toil. The rivers flowed clear, the skies remained calm, and the land itself sang with life. To the world, it appeared that harmony had finally been restored. But deep within Cronus's heart, there was no peace. The memory of his father's curse lingered, the dark prophecy that one day one of his own children would overthrow him just as he had overthrown Uranus. The words haunted him, echoing in his mind like a whisper that never faded. Fear, more than power, became his companion. When his wife Rhea bore their first child, a son named Hestia, Cronus's dread overcame his love. He could not bear the thought of losing his throne, and so as soon as the child was born, Cronus swallowed her whole. Rhea screamed in horror, but the act was done. The mighty Titan had devoured his own daughter to escape a fate he could not avoid. In the years that followed, Rhea bore more children, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, and each time Cronus swallowed them as well. One by one, the children disappeared into his vast belly, trapped in eternal darkness, unable to cry or grow or escape. Rhea's sorrow was immeasurable. The earth herself wept for her pain, for she too was a mother. The mountains grew cold and the rivers slowed. Rhea wandered the land, mourning the loss of her children, her heart broken, her hope fading. But the prophecy still waited, patient, inevitable. When her sixth child was soon to be born, Rhea could no longer endure the cycle of grief. Desperate, she sought help from her mother, Gaia, who listened with understanding and quiet anger. Gaia, who had once suffered under Uranus, knew too well the cruelty of power driven by fear. Together, Gaia and Rhea devised a plan. When the time came for the birth, Rhea fled in secret to the island of Crete, where in a hidden cave on Mount Dicte she gave birth to her final child, a son named Zeus. The air was still and sacred, and the moment was filled with a strange calm, as though the universe itself held its breath. Rhea swaddled the newborn in soft cloth, kissed his brow, and whispered promises of protection and destiny. Then, with trembling hands, she wrapped a stone in the same cloth and brought it before Cronus. Blinded by his paranoia, Cronus took the bundle without suspicion and swallowed it whole, believing he had once again escaped his doom. But the true child, The one destined to end his reign was hidden far away, safe in the arms of the earth. On Crete, Gaia kept her promise. The infant Zeus was cared for by the nymphs, tended to by the gentle spirits of nature. Bees brought him honey, and the sacred goat Amalti fed him milk. To conceal his cries from Cronus, warriors known as the Curetis clashed their shields and swords in rhythmic dance, their noise echoing through the mountains like distant thunder. Years passed, and Zeus grew, strong, wise, and curious. He learned from the whispers of the trees, from the rivers that carried the memory of the world, and from Gaia herself, who spoke to him of balance and justice. She told him of his brothers and sisters trapped in the darkness of Cronus's body, and of the time that would soon come when he must free them. When Zeus reached his full strength, he left the island and returned to confront the father he had never known. Disguised as a servant, he entered Cronus's court and served him wine. But in that cup, Gaia had placed a powerful potion, a draught that would undo the crimes of the past. As Cronus drank deeply, a shudder ran through his mighty form. His face twisted, his strength faltered, and with a great roar he began to vomit forth all that he had swallowed long ago. Out came the stone, and then, one by one, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Though they had spent years in darkness, the divine spark within them had not faded. They emerged full-grown and radiant, each shining with the light of immortality. For the first time since the dawn of the Golden Age, the 6 siblings stood together, united by blood and purpose. Cronus, weakened and enraged, saw what was coming. He called upon his brothers and sisters, the Titans who once ruled beside him, and demanded their allegiance in the coming war. The heavens darkened, the earth trembled. For 10 long years the universe would be torn between 2 generations of gods, the old and the new. On one side stood Cronus and the mighty Titans, Atlas, Hyperion, Iapetus, and many others, fierce and ancient beings who had shaped the world from its beginning. On the other side stood Zeus and his siblings, the Olympians, aided by Gaia and by the Cyclops and Hecatoncheires, whom Zeus had freed from their prison in Tartarus. The battle that followed was beyond mortal comprehension. Mountains were hurled through the sky like stones, oceans boiled, and the stars dimmed from the fury of the conflict. Zeus hurled thunderbolts forged by the Cyclops, each strike shaking heaven and earth. Poseidon raised tidal waves that swallowed mountains, while Hades summoned shadows from the underworld to swallow the armies of Cronus. For 10 years, neither side yielded. The Titans fought with the fury of gods who refused to fade, while the Olympians fought with the strength of destiny itself. But in the end, fate favored the new. With one final blinding thunderbolt, Zeus struck down Cronus, and the war came to an end. The sky split open, and silence fell. The old gods were defeated. The rule of the Titans was over. Zeus, standing among the clouds, looked down at the world below, the mountains torn, the seas restless, and the heavens still trembling from the echoes of war. He knew that his victory had come at a terrible cost, and that the peace to follow would require wisdom as much as power. The Titans who had opposed him were cast into Tartarus, bound in chains of unbreakable bronze, watched over by the 100-handed giants. Atlas, who had fought fiercely against Zeus, was given a special punishment. he was made to stand at the edge of the world, condemned to hold the sky upon his shoulders for all eternity. And so began a new era, the Age of Olympus. Zeus and his brothers and sisters divided the realms among themselves. Zeus took the heavens to rule as king of gods and men. Poseidon claimed the sea with its depths and its storms. Hades took the underworld, the silent realm of the dead. Hera became queen of Olympus, wise and proud, while Hestia tended to the fertile earth and the sacred fire burned forever. Balance had been restored once more, but only for a time. For though Cronus was gone, his shadow still lingered, and within the hearts of gods and mortals alike, the seeds of conflict would never truly die. And as Zeus gazed into the distance, beyond the clouds, beyond the horizon, he felt a chill, faint but real. He had won the world, but deep inside, he knew that one day the cycle might begin again.
When the dust of the Titan War finally settled, and the great roars of thunder faded into silence, the world stood renewed, scarred, yet full of potential. The mountains that had been torn apart now reached higher than ever before. The rivers carved new paths across the land, whispering songs of peace. The air was lighter, the sky wider, and the stars seemed to burn brighter than they had since the dawn of time. At the heart of this new world, high above the clouds, rose a mountain unlike any other, Mount Olympus. Its peaks shimmered with golden light, untouched by wind or storm. Here the new gods, the Olympians, built their home. It was a place where immortal laughter echoed through marble halls, where ambrosia flowed like wine, and where the very air seemed to hum with divine power. From this sacred throne, Zeus, son of Cronus, ruled as king over gods and mortals alike. Zeus was not merely powerful, he was a force of balance, standing between chaos and order. His eyes were sharp as lightning, yet his voice could be as soft as rain. He understood that to govern the cosmos, he needed not just strength, but wisdom. For power without restraint was the curse that had doomed his father before him. Under his rule, the world was divided into three great realms. The heavens, where the stars and the light resided, were his domain. The sea, deep and restless, belonged to Poseidon, his brother, and the underworld, where the souls of the departed wandered, fell to Hades. Each took their throne and swore an oath of loyalty, not as slaves, but as equals who shared the burden of eternity. Gaia, the ancient mother, looked upon her grandchildren and saw that the cycle of creation had turned once more. Yet even she felt a quiet unease, for she knew that no age of peace lasts forever. The seeds of struggle were sown not in malice, but in the very nature of existence. From Olympus, the new gods began to shape the order of the world. The seasons were born from Demeter's will. The hearth fire of every home was guarded by Hestia. Hera watched over the bonds of family and marriage, while Poseidon stirred the seas, his moods changing like the waves themselves. Hades ruled in silence, unseen but ever present, guiding the dead with solemn care. But Zeus, the father of gods and men, watched over all. He brought law to the heavens and decrees to the earth. When thunder rolled across the sky, it was his voice that mortals heard, not in anger, but as a reminder that balance must always be kept. Still, even as Olympus flourished, something stirred far below. Deep within the caves of the world, among the remnants of the Titans, a spark of rebellion smoldered. The earth remembered pain, and the ancient ones who had been cast down into Tartarus whispered their resentment through cracks in the world. Zeus heard these whispers and did not ignore them, for he had learned that to forget the past is to invite its return. Yet not all who lived among the immortals sought war or power. Some looked upon the fragile world of mortals with curiosity, even love. Among them was Prometheus, a Titan who had not fought against Zeus, but had chosen to stand beside him during the war. His name meant forethought, and his wisdom was deep. He looked upon the new world and saw its potential, not just in the gods, but in the small, fleeting creatures who walked upon the earth. They shivered beneath the cold night sky, unaware that they were part of the same grand story that shaped the heavens. Prometheus pitied them. He saw in them the same spark of creation that once burned in chaos, the same yearning to rise beyond the darkness. And so, against Zeus's will, Prometheus descended from Olympus and gave fire to mankind. He carried it in a hollow reed, a flame stolen from the hearth of the gods, and placed it gently in mortal hands. For the first time, the darkness was broken. The fire flickered, danced, and roared, and with it came warmth, light, and knowledge. Humanity began to build, to dream, and to defy. When Zeus looked down and saw the flames spreading across the land, he grew troubled. He feared that mankind, armed with divine knowledge, might one day challenge the order of heaven itself. Fire was not merely a gift, it was power, and with power came disobedience. Prometheus stood before Zeus and spoke with calm defiance. "They are your children too. Do not fear their rise, for they honor you in their hope." But Zeus could not be swayed. He saw too much of Cronus in his own reflection, too much of rebellion in Prometheus's eyes. To remind both gods and mortals of the price of defiance, he decreed a punishment both eternal and cruel. Prometheus was taken to the peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, bound by unbreakable chains. There an eagle, the bird of Zeus himself, descended each day to tear at his liver, which would grow back each night. It was a torment without end. Yet Prometheus endured it without begging, without hate, and without surrender. He had given humanity their first light, and he would suffer for that light forever. From his throne, Zeus watched, his heart divided. He understood the burden of rule. To maintain order, one must sometimes become the storm. But as he looked upon the mortals, now thriving in their villages and raising their eyes to the stars, he felt something shift deep within him. Not fear, but curiosity. He began to test them. And so began the many trials of mankind, the age of flood and fire, of sacrifice and hope. Zeus sent challenges not out of cruelty, but to shape mankind into something enduring, something capable of wisdom. And though he sometimes unleashed his wrath, he also protected them from the chaos that forever waited beyond the edges of the world. From Olympus, the gods watched and learned. Some grew jealous of mortals, others fascinated. Love, envy, compassion, and betrayal began to weave their threads into the tapestry of both divine and human destiny. The world had entered a new balance. fragile, trembling, alive. And at the center of it all sat Zeus, the ruler of Olympus, the keeper of thunder, forever watching the heavens and the earth below, knowing that even gods cannot escape the echo of their own creation.
Time passed softly upon Olympus. Seasons turned, empires of men rose and crumbled, and yet the gods remained, eternal, watching from their shining thrones as life below unfolded like a dream they could never fully control. Zeus, though the ruler of heaven, was not immune to longing. He had defeated titans and tamed storms, yet within his immortal heart lived a restlessness, the same spark of desire that once moved chaos itself to creation. He loved often and fiercely, not for conquest, but for the beauty he saw in the mortal world, fleeting lives that burned bright before fading, hearts that dared to love even under the eyes of gods. From these divine unions came children, some god, some mortal, some caught between. Each was a thread in the great tapestry of fate, destined to shape the balance between heaven and earth. Hera, queen of the gods, wife and sister to Zeus, watched these affairs with a heart torn between dignity and fury. She was the goddess of marriage, yet her own was marked by betrayal. Her love for Zeus was deep, but her pride was deeper still, and each of his mortal passions felt to her like a wound that never healed. Her wrath was not the blind rage of vengeance, it was the sorrow of a goddess who could not be forgotten nor forsaken. And so, when she turned her gaze upon those whom Zeus loved, her vengeance was patient, elegant, and inescapable. One such story was that of Semele, a mortal princess whose beauty caught Zeus's wandering eye. He came to her disguised as a man of gentle grace, his voice soft, his presence radiant but restrained. She loved him not as a god, but as one who saw her soul. But Hera learned of this, and jealousy took root in her heart. Disguised as an old woman, Hera visited Semele and whispered poison into her ear. "If your lover is truly Zeus, Lord of Thunder, ask him to reveal himself in his full glory. A god's love should never hide in shadow." When next Zeus came to Semele, she begged him to show her his true form. Bound by his divine word, he agreed. But no mortal could behold a god unveiled. In a flash of lightning and a roar of thunder, Semele was consumed, her body turned to ash. Yet from her womb Zeus rescued their unborn son and sewed him into his own thigh. Months later, the child was born again, the twice-born god Dionysus, destined to bring both ecstasy and madness to the world. Such was the way of the gods, love and ruin intertwined, creation and destruction dancing hand in hand. There was Leda, who dreamed one night of a swan descending from the heavens, its feathers glimmering like moonlight. From that union came Helen, the most beautiful of mortals, whose face would one day launch 1,000 ships. And Europa, the Phoenician princess who was carried away across the sea by Zeus disguised as a white bull, gentle yet irresistible. Upon the shores of Crete she bore him sons who would found kingdoms, their blood flowing through generations of kings. Then there was Io, the maiden turned into a white cow by Zeus to hide her from Hera's gaze. But Hera saw through the deception and sent a watchful 100-eyed giant to guard her. Even after Zeus freed her, Hera's vengeance followed in the form of a stinging gadfly, driving Io across the world, from the mountains of Greece to the sands of Egypt. A wanderer of sorrow, forever cursed for being loved by a god. Each story,
though tragic, was also a reflection of divine yearning, the endless struggle between immortality and the fragile beauty of mortal life. Through them, the gods came to understand that even their power could not shield them from emotion. Love humbled them, jealousy revealed them, and loss reminded them that eternity is not freedom, but endurance. Among the children of these unions were those who would bridge the gap between gods and men, the heroes. The first among them was Perseus, son of Zeus and the mortal Danae. When a prophecy foretold that her son would bring the death of her father, King Acrisius locked her away in a tower of bronze. But Zeus, taking the form of golden rain, descended upon her, and she conceived a child of divine blood. Cast into the sea in a wooden chest, mother and son were carried to safety by the will of fate. Perseus grew under the guidance of the gods themselves. With Hermes' winged sandals and Athena's shining shield, he set out to slay the Gorgon Medusa, whose gaze could turn any living thing to stone. Through courage and wit, he triumphed, and from the blood of Medusa sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, a symbol of freedom born from terror. Perseus returned as both savior and symbol, a mortal who had dared to face the darkness and survived. But none would rival the might of Heracles, the greatest of all heroes, born of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene. From the moment of his birth, Hera's hatred followed him. She sent serpents to his cradle, but even as an infant, Heracles crushed them in his tiny hands. He grew into a man of immense strength, yet his heart was burdened with pain and destiny. In a fit of madness sent by Hera, Heracles committed a terrible deed, one that would haunt him forever. To atone, he undertook 12 impossible labors, tasks that tested not just his strength, but his will to live. He fought the Nemean lion, whose skin no blade could pierce. He captured the golden hind of Artemis. He cleansed the filth of King Augeas' stables, and he descended into the underworld itself to bring back the three-headed hound Kerberos. Each trial broke him, yet rebuilt him stronger. He was both punished and purified, and in the end, when his mortal life came to its close, Zeus took pity and raised him to Olympus, not as a son to be hidden, but as an equal to stand among the gods. Through heroes like Perseus, Heracles, and many more, Theseus, Jason, Achilles, the gods learned something vital, that mortality, though fleeting, held a power the immortals could never claim. Mortals could change. They could fall, suffer, and rise again. Their stories had endings, and in those endings lay meaning. Zeus watched as these heroes lived and died, as their legends grew into songs that echoed across centuries. He began to understand that the divine was not separate from humanity. It was reflected in their courage, their longing, their endless striving against fate. The age of heroes had begun, an era where gods still ruled from the clouds, but their voices could be heard in the hearts of men. Love and war, triumph and tragedy, all intertwined in the endless melody of existence. And far above, on the shining summit of Olympus, Zeus sat on his throne, not in solitude, but in contemplation. He looked upon the world he had shaped, the children he had fathered, and the countless souls that moved through time like stars across an infinite sky. He understood at last that the greatest legacy of gods is not dominion, but remembrance, that every story told, every whisper of love or grief keeps the divine alive. The gods would endure, But so too would humanity. And as the night deepened over the world, the fires of both Olympus and earth burned side by side, eternal, intertwined, and forever watching one another in the silent glow of eternity.
Ages passed upon the mountain of Olympus, and the golden halls of the gods gleamed beneath an endless sky. The songs of nymphs and muses filled the air, the feasts of ambrosia never ceased, and the world below ripened with life. Mortals built cities of marble and bronze, sailed seas that once belonged only to Poseidon, and prayed to the heavens for favor and mercy. Yet time, though it has no dominion over the immortal, leaves its mark in subtler ways. It weaves itself not into the body, but into the soul. The gods, though eternal, began to feel the quiet weight of the centuries, the stillness after too many victories, the silence after endless songs. For the world they had shaped was no longer as it once was. The mortals they had guided now began to look not upward for guidance, but inward to themselves. Whispers began to drift through the heavens, whispers of change, of something moving beyond even the sight of Zeus. It was said that deep beneath the earth, in the dark caverns of prophecy, the voice of Gaia stirred once more. She spoke to those who still listened, that the reign of the Olympians would not last forever, and that a new age was coming, one not of gods, but of men. Zeus heard these words, and was silent for a long time. He had faced prophecy before, the curse of his father, the foretelling of Cronus's fall, and had always prevailed. Yet now he felt something different. It was not fear, but understanding. The universe moved in cycles, each age giving birth to the next. Even the mightiest thunder would one day fade into echo. Still, pride stirred within the hearts of the immortals. To yield to destiny was to admit weakness, and pride was a flame that even the gods could not extinguish. Among the Olympians whispers of defiance arose. "We are eternal," said Ares, the god of war. "How can the sons of dust ever replace the divine?" Athena, wise and far-seeing, said nothing, but her eyes betrayed concern. She knew that wisdom cannot halt the turning of time. It can only prepare one to meet it. The first signs came quietly. The altars of men grew fewer. The prayers that once rose like morning smoke began to fade. The poets still sang of Zeus, Hera, and Apollo, but their songs grew nostalgic, the hymns of memory rather than worship. In the cities, philosophers spoke of reason, of stars, of the human mind. Slowly, imperceptibly, faith began to shift from heaven to earth. But before the silence came, the last storm. From the depths of the world, from the black pit of Tartarus, came a new terror. Typhon, the monstrous child of Gaia and Tartarus, born of Earth's resentment and chaos's lingering wrath. His body towered to the sky, his arms stretched to the horizon, and from his eyes poured fire. Each step shook mountains, each roar split the heavens. Zeus beheld the creature and knew that this was not merely a battle for power, but a trial of fate. If he fell, the order of the world would fall with him. The war between Zeus and Typhon was unlike any that had come before. Thunder and flame clashed over the sea, mountains burned, and the stars trembled in their constellations. The gods fled from Olympus as the monster's shadow consumed the world. But Zeus, wielding his thunderbolts forged by the Cyclops, stood unyielding. For days and nights without end they fought, sky against earth, order against chaos, father against the last child of the abyss. At last, with a cry that echoed through eternity, Zeus struck Typhon down. The monster fell,
his flames quenched, his body buried beneath the black rock of Mount Etna, where his rage would forever simmer in the form of fire and ash. The gods returned to Olympus, victorious once again, but not unchanged. They had looked upon the edge of existence and seen their reflection, fierce, beautiful, and impermanent. Peace followed, but it was no longer the peace of innocence. It was the calm of acceptance, the quiet before the great turning of ages. From his throne, Zeus gazed down at the mortal world. He saw empires rise and crumble like waves, heroes become kings, kings become myths, and myths fade into dust. But in every human heart that dared to love, to fight, to dream, he saw a spark, a reflection of the divine. Humanity no longer needed Olympus to command its destiny. The gods had shaped them too well. And so, slowly the heavens began to withdraw. The voices that once thundered in the clouds grew distant. The great halls of Olympus remained, but their laughter faded, their songs softened. The gods watched in silence as mortals began to build temples not of stone, but of thought, temples of philosophy, of knowledge, of faith in themselves. Hera tended her golden garden in quiet reflection. Athena walked unseen among mortal scholars, whispering wisdom into their hearts. Apollo still cast his light upon the world each dawn, though fewer praised his name. Poseidon stirred the seas when he wished, and Hades ruled his shadowed realm as he always had, undisturbed by time. Zeus alone remained upon the highest peak, watching. He no longer hurled his thunder to command obedience. Instead, he held it like an old memory, a relic of what once was. He understood now that true immortality does not come from power, but from remembrance. And as the centuries passed, the world forgot to fear the gods, but it did not forget to tell their stories. In campfires, in temples, in the hearts of poets and dreamers, their names lived on, carried not by worship, but by wonder. The twilight of the gods was not an ending, but a transformation. They did not die. They became eternal in a different way, as symbols, as ideas, as whispers of the divine that would live on forever in the human soul. In the final light of that fading age, as stars shimmered above the quiet world, Zeus closed his eyes. The wind carried the laughter of mortals, the songs of their children, and the crackle of fires that Prometheus had once given them. It was enough. The world no longer belonged to the gods, but the gods would forever belong to the world. And thus, the Age of Olympus passed into legend, not with thunder, but with silence, not with loss, but with remembrance. For in every story told beneath the night sky, in every whisper of courage, in every dream that dares to reach beyond the mortal, the voice of the divine still speaks. And in that voice, faint but eternal, the gods live on.
And so, dear listener, the fire fades. The echoes of thunder have grown still, and the mountain of Olympus stands quiet beneath the stars. The gods have retreated into memory, yet their stories remain, not carved in marble, not sung by choirs, but whispered in the human heart. For as long as we dream, they will never be gone. Zeus's strength still stirs in every act of courage. Athena's wisdom still shines in every spark of understanding. and Aphrodite's grace lingers wherever love dares to bloom. These myths were never merely tales of power. They were mirrors, showing us who we are and what we might become. They taught us that creation and chaos, pride and mercy, love and loss, all are woven into the same endless tapestry. And when we listen to these stories, here in the quiet of night, we keep that ancient flame alive. So, if you've journeyed with me through these timeless legends, take a breath. Feel the weight of the stars above you, and remember, even the gods found peace in silence. Thank you for joining me tonight here at Midnight Historian. If this story brought you calm or wonder, or simply a moment of stillness before sleep, I invite you to subscribe, to leave a thought in the comments, and to return again, for there are countless more stories waiting in the dark, each carrying the light of worlds long past. Until next time, rest well, dream deeply, and may the echoes of Olympus watch over your sleep.